Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there is a ton of news stories to get into today. So let's talk about some Impact Wrestling. Of course, Impact Wrestling on AXS TV was last night on AXS TV. Where else would it be? Twitch, I guess, as well. But we're going to talk about Kenny Omega, the current Impact World Champion, and of course the AEW World Champion, and of course the AAA Mega Campeon. That's Kenny Omega, and we have some update when it comes to his Impact World Championship reign, how long this thing has been in the works for, how much detail has gone into it, how far in advance AEW and Impact Wrestling have booked this all out, and it's quite extensive actually. Everything is going by plan when it comes to AEW and Impact Wrestling, which is interesting, especially when we've been talking recently here on the channel about when's Kenny Omega going to drop the Impact World Championship, who's he going to drop it to, what are Impact looking to get out of this, what are AEW looking to get out of this, can Impact Wrestling make a star by choosing the person to defeat Kenny Omega? There's lots of different conversation points when it comes round to Kenny Omega's Impact World Championship reign, especially I think he's been the champion, since about April now. There can be discussions on, is it a success so far? How do we judge if it's a success? Do you look at opponents being made? Do you look at buy rates? Do you look at subscriptions to Impact Plus? How do you measure it all? And how is it going to end? What's going to happen in the near future? Well, we've got some information about all of that, and it's very interesting to say the least. Now, AEW and Impact Wrestling officials reportedly mapped out plans for Kenny Omega's Impact World title run before he won the championship from Rich Swann back at Rebellion in April. Now, there's no word yet on when Omega is going to drop the Impact World Championship, but it was noted on the latest edition of the Wrestling Observer radio show that the two companies collaborated on plans for the title reign and that their, quote, battle plan was mapped out before the title change even took place. It was said that officials decided on what the title reign would consist of, which AEW and Impact wrestlers would be appearing on what shows, and when Impact can get their World Championship back. These factors were also said to be part of a deal way, way, way ahead of time before anything even was put pen to paper or anything was figured out. Now, it remains to be seen if the working relationship between AEW and Impact Wrestling will continue once Kenny Omega drops the championship. I think that's a really significant point there to discuss as well. Now, Omega has defended the Impact World Championship just once after winning it from Rich Swann. That, of course, was against Moose at Impact's Against All Odds event on June 12th. His next title defense will come against Sami Callihan on July 17 at the Slammiversary pay-per-view. Now, Omega's next AEW World Championship defense will come this Saturday night on AEW Saturday Night Dynamite against Jungle Boy. He is also scheduled to defend his AAA Mega Championship against Andrade El Idolo on August 14 at AAA's Triple Mania 29 event. So Omega's a busy, busy man coming into the summer, which doesn't lend well considering that Omega's beat up. Omega is hurting right now. He's got a significant amount of little niggles, bruised tailbone, possibly, I think he has a torn labrum as well. That's not a little niggle, certainly. That's a big injury, plus a plethora of other injuries as well. I think he cut his hand at Double or Nothing that required some stitches as well. He is going through right now what you would expect a guy to go through that's having to defend 3 world championships across 3 different promotions. It's tough. It's a grueling schedule, and you can only do it for so long. And Kenny Omega is only going to do it for so long. So I know the criticism of this report could be, from the Wrestling Observer Radio, the criticism could be, well, it doesn't really tell us that much. That is probably true. The big details that people are looking for there, i.e. when is Kenny Omega going to drop the championship, who is he going to drop it to, what is the relationship between AEW and Impact Wrestling going to be once Kenny Omega does drop the AEW World Championship, the Impact World Championship rather, and I suppose the AEW World Championship for that matter. What is that relationship going to look like? We don't know. And we've spoken about it and speculated on it quite a lot here on the channel. I think I'm pretty sure, and I might be wrong here, I'm pretty sure I remember talking about this here on the channel. I might be wrong, but I do remember hearing the report previously that things had been worked out when it comes to Kenny Omega, when it comes to Impact Wrestling, and it comes to AEW way, way ahead of time anyway. The expectation, and the reason I say that, and I'm cutting myself off there, but the reason I say that is because from my point of view, that was one of my predictions at the start of this year, was that Kenny Omega would challenge for the Impact World Championship and he would ultimately win the Impact World Championship. I think I made that prediction in like January or something like that, really early on during this year. And that's not because I'm Nostradamus, that's not because I'm an insider and I have the scoops and I have all of this insider information. I don't. I'm a fan, and I kind of pride myself on that on this channel, that, I'm not one of those people that's got insider information or scoops or whatever. I like to be just like you watching this video. I'm just a fan, ultimately, and I'm just trying to read things as I see it. And again, and looking at the reports that we saw online, going all the way back to December on that Winter is Coming edition of Dynamite, when this AEW and Impact Wrestling relationship was first truly kicked off. Looking back on it then, the reports and the rumblings were that Impact and AEW, whilst they didn't know everything they were going to do at that period of time, over the course of the next few weeks, they figured it all out. They figured out exactly what they were going to do. If you don't think that AEW and Impact Wrestling had a plan all the way back there, it's very naive. Just look at Kenny Omega's first appearance. Look at Kenny Omega's first appearance on Impact Wrestling way back in December of 2020, over 6 months ago at this point. Look back on Kenny Omega's first appearance. That first appearance of Kenny Omega when he's on the tour bus, when he's there with Don Callis and he's there with Josh Matthews. His first appearance as the AEW World Champion, which took place on Impact Wrestling, by the way. During that first appearance, what does he say? He says, "I'm a bout collector. When I was younger, I used to try and collect comic books, but I realized I couldn't collect them all, so I stopped. I transitioned that into collecting championships. Now I'm the AAA Mega Champion. I'm the AEW World Champion. Who knows what other championships I'll go after." That right there was long-term storytelling, which we're all desperate for, right? We're all desperate for that long-term storytelling. AEW, frankly, do it pretty well. But we're all desperate for that long-term storytelling, and I think this is it's a great example of it. It's long-term storytelling. It's something that is mapped out, predetermined way, way, way ahead of time. Kenny Omega is going to win the World Championship probably at Rebellion. I would think this is probably what the plans were. The discussion certainly would have looked like. Kenny Omega, he's going to come in at the end of the year. He's going to wrestle a match at Hard to Kill, obviously, because he had the 6-man tag team match. He's going to win the World Championship at Rebellion. He's probably going to do some Impact Plus matches in between there. This is what I think it might look like. He's going to defend successfully the championship at Slammiversary, and then he's going to drop the Impact World Championship at Bound for Glory. I still think that's the timeline of events. I don't think they'll defer from that. I know a lot of people are saying that maybe he does drop the World Championship to Sami Callihan at Slammiversary because of obviously him being very beat up, and he is injured right now, and the schedule is quite intensive, especially considering AEW is going to be going back to touring as well, and he's got other commitments, and he is maybe looking to reduce that workload and that hectic schedule he's on right now. I can see the logic behind that. I truly can. And I don't mean this as any disrespect to Sami Callihan. I don't. I just don't see what Impact Wrestling really benefits out of having Sami Callihan win the World Championship against Kenny Omega at Slammiversary. Now, people will say, well, it's an Impact Wrestling star going over against a major AEW star on a big pay-per-view. That's good for Impact Wrestling. That's true. That is good for Impact Wrestling. But in terms of the wider Impact Wrestling universe, if you will, to steal a phrase from WWE, Sami Callihan's a made guy in that world. Sami Callihan, yes, he is an Impact guy. He's not going anywhere else. He's probably going to stick with Impact Wrestling for largely the remainder of his career. Re-signed with the company last year. But Sami Callihan's a made guy. He's a former Impact World Champion anyway. He's done it before. And in that universe, he can go into the main event, and he can transition back into the mid-card, and he can be a babyface, he can be a heel, he can do whatever he wants. He's Sami Callihan. And I know they're trying to portray him like a maverick, like an outsider, like this crazy guy. I just don't think he's truly the right choice to dethrone Kenny Omega, and I'll tell you why. The reason I don't think he is the right choice is because, like I said, he's a made guy. Whoever it is that defeats Kenny Omega for that Impact World Championship, they are made inside Impact Wrestling. They are absolutely made. They are the premier person on that roster. They are the top male star in Impact Wrestling. They are not only the world champion, but they're the guy that beat one of the best wrestlers in the world, one of the most, at the moment, certainly from an AEW perspective, but I guess for most pro wrestling fans know who Kenny Omega is. That's a big deal. That's a really big spot for whoever defeats Kenny Omega. That person on the Impact Wrestling roster, that is being anointed, chosen by the Impact Wrestling officials. You're our guy. You're the guy that's not only going to be the world champion, but we're going to build the company around. You're the guy that we're going to go forward with. And that's a difficult spot for Impact Wrestling to figure out, of course, because traditionally, people go into Impact Wrestling and then they leave. They go to WWE or they go to AEW. It's difficult sometimes to find a degree of loyalty to Impact because there are bigger and broader horizons for the talent to go to. But there are other options there. And again, Sami Callihan has been an Impact World Champion. I think if you're going to look at actively growing Impact as a brand once again, which is a difficult job anyway, considering the baggage and its history, you're going to have to look at someone that can really, branch off into a WWE or an AEW, or looks like a big star. And for me, that name is someone like Moose. I said it before. I'm still very surprised at this point the main event of Slammiversary isn't Kenny Omega versus Moose. I'm surprised they did that match at Against All Odds. If it was me, I would have moved that match to Slammiversary. And if you wanted to have Moose win the championship, that would have been a place to do it. Again, I don't know if Kenny Omega is ultimately going to drop the Impact World Championship at Slammiversary. Maybe that's why they've decided to have Sami Callihan versus Kenny Omega at that event, because Omega's going to win and then Moose can defeat Kenny Omega at Bound for Glory. I don't know. I just think that you've just re-signed Moose. He's there for 2 years on a significantly more amount of money, an increased amount of money, an increased guarantee. You would think, logic would suggest that Impact would go, right, we fought hard to keep Moose. There was interest. He's in the best shape of his life. He's done some tremendous work over the past 12 months. TNA World Heavyweight Champion, unification match with Rich Swann. Just tremendous work. We had him go over against EC3 when EC3 was briefly back with the company. That was all in an effort to get Moose over to eventually become the world champion. Plans have changed because Kenny Omega has come in, but in the long term, Moose can still be our guy. We've signed him for 2 more years. Again, I just feel like that moment is better off suited for someone like Moose, not someone like Callihan, who has been a world champion, but I don't know if he's truly the guy you build the company around. And I don't mean to sound like Triple H talking about Daniel Bryan in 2014 or anything like that, but I feel like there are better options there, which again leads me to think that maybe, again, going back to the original story here that Dave Meltzer was reporting that everything had been mapped out ahead of time, I kind of look at it by saying that maybe AEW and Impact worked out Kenny Omega is going to be at all 4 of our pay-per-view events this year. Hard to Kill, Rebellion, Slammiversary, and Bound for Glory. With him dropping that World Championship at Bound for Glory because Kenny Omega would have dropped the AEW World Championship by then as well. I've mentioned this before, and again, it's a really important point we have to consider with all of this, is that does AEW realistically want their world champion to be doing a job clean to an Impact Wrestling talent? And again, I don't mean that by any disrespect to the Impact Wrestling talents, but AEW will perceive Impact as a smaller company because they are a smaller company. And this is what happens when you have companies and promotions working with each other. They want to protect their own talent. And sometimes egos do get in the way. But realistically, the AEW World Champion Kenny Omega, he's not doing jobs on AEW television. So why would he do jobs clean to people on Impact Wrestling television whilst he's still the AEW World Champion? That's an issue as well. So I've said before that I think that as long as Kenny Omega is the AEW World Champion, I think he stays the Impact World Champion. Once he loses that bout, I think then it opens the door for him to drop the Impact World Championship, but not before then. So given the horizon at the moment, when does he drop the AEW World Championship? The timeline fits perfectly for Omega to drop the AEW World Championship at All Out. Who that would be to, I don't know. Time will only tell. That's in September. He drops the championship then. The following month is Bound for Glory. He can drop the Impact World Championship then. That timeline still works for me. And again, given how long that Impact and AEW reportedly mapped all of this out, that makes sense. That does make sense to me. Time will only tell whether they go with that, though. I mean, it might be a case of Omega, the agreement was made at the end of last year, start of this year, that Omega would go all the way to Slammiversary, then he would stop. When it comes to what the working relationship with Impact and AEW looks like post-Kenny Omega, that's a really big question. And I think that's a question that maybe I don't think anyone has an answer to right now. The reason this AEW and Impact working relationship is still going is because Omega is the world champion for Impact Wrestling. Don Callis is no longer an executive vice president of Impact Wrestling. He's an AEW talent. That bridge isn't even there anymore. Previously, the bridge was that Don Callis was an executive with Impact, but he was also a close friend of Kenny Omega. That's how that bridge came over. Well, Don Callis has crossed over that bridge, and now he's on the AEW side of things with Kenny Omega, and there's nobody on the other side. So I don't know what link there would be, apart from the fact that they've worked together previously. We could still see a situation, I suppose, in the same vein as this Impact Wrestling and New Japan Pro Wrestling working relationship, whereby just every taping, AEW sends a talent. Who that talent is, maybe it's someone that doesn't have anything planned on AEW television. If it's a talent that's been written off of TV for a while, or they just need some TV time, or they need to go somewhere to try out a new gimmick, get something over, do a character change, whatever, that's where I think the working relationship between AEW and Impact could be. I don't know if it's going to be as extensive as what we're seeing right now with Kenny Omega and Don Callis and all of that being so intertwined. I don't think that's going to be the case going forward post-Kenny Omega. Time will tell that. Time will tell. I think a great example of what it could have been, truly what it could have been, is when Sammy Guevara left the Inner Circle, and the plan was for him to come in and do a few matches on Impact Wrestling television. That could have been something where I think that works, because logically that makes sense. He leaves the Inner Circle, he leaves AEW. Where would you go? You go to Impact, you work a couple of TV tapings, which counts for a couple of months, then you come back to AEW television. I think that is the working relationship that I see with Impact and AEW going forward. Whether or not that is the plan for post-Kenny Omega's version of Impact, time will only tell. But it's certainly very interesting. It's interesting. Now, last night, of course, was another episode of Impact Wrestling on AXS TV, so we do have some stories coming out of it. One was Violent by Design retaining the Impact Tag Team Championships in a main event against Eddie Edwards and Kojima. I tell you what, I really enjoyed this match. I really, truly did. It's the same vein that I was really looking forward to Joe Doring versus Kojima at Against All Odds, and I thought that match delivered just far better than I ever thought it was going to. I was always looking forward to that match anyway, because I just felt like these were two guys that have a ton of history in Japan, whether it's All Japan Pro Wrestling, New Japan, whatever, and I thought these guys are just going to beat the hell out of each other. If you've seen Joe Doring's style in the ring, and again, I'm not totally familiar with Kojima. I've seen a couple of his matches in the past. I thought these guys are just going to beat the hell out of each other. We're hardly getting Kojima in his prime, so I was weary of that. But I thought their match at Against All Odds was a lot of fun, truly a lot of fun. It started off really slow, but in the end, they just beat the hell out of each other. And it was kind of the same last night on Impact Wrestling on AXS TV. They just beat the hell out of each other, the two tag teams. It was great. Joe Doring has this real unique way of working, and I think it's so fun. It's such a throwback. It really is. I think the comparison for Stan Hansen is there because they do look similar and they compete in the cowboy boots and all that. But it is similar. Like, you know, everything is so simple, but it looks like it just hurts. He's a big guy, you know, short arm clothesline or Death Valley driver into a short arm clothesline. When he does his cross body as well, he hits the rope. He's a big guy. He's over 300 pounds. He shouldn't be doing cross bodies, and it's not like a cross body of a sort of jump up in the air and come all the way down. It's a cross body. He just flings himself and he crushes people. It's great. I'm actually just a really big fan of Joe Doring's work, and I know that some people might find him maybe slightly dull or boring, but again, I just think he's a throwback. I think he's so much fun. And he got the pinfall victory with the Revolution Bomb on Eddie Edwards. And as well, this is what I loved as well. So he does the power bomb on Eddie Edwards. And as he's doing the pin, he is looking straight into the hard camera. And he's just like gurning or pulling this just easy, like, I can't even do it justice. Just his funny face. And it's funny, but it's just, it adds to a layer of character about this guy. And they've really got Joe Doring in this role as the heater, the big muscle of Violent by Design so well, because this is also a group that contains Rhino, who's a big guy in himself, a power guy, but he just pales in comparison to Joe Doring. He truly does. And I'm a big fan of Violent by Design, big fan of the faction. I do think there are more names that can and probably will come into the faction in the future. I know I've said Alexander Wolf. It's going to be fascinating to see what happens when Heath, of course, comes back, because you've got the Rhino connection there. Violent by Design continue to be just in their own pocket of Impact, but truly one of the best things on that broadcast. And Impact does for a while they've had really good content, but this is really interesting. And for something that's kind of just built up slowly since Turning Point and maybe didn't have a ton of momentum when it first started last year, Violent by Design is such a fun watch. And for a tag team title main event, I thought it was a real fun watch, and I really did enjoy it. It was a great main event, and interesting to see where they go with the tag team titles right now. Again, the division is slightly light. I don't see the Good Brothers challenging Violent by Design. That doesn't make sense. So in terms of the opponents for Slammiversary, that's a bit of an open situation. Possibly we can maybe see some other people come in. I don't know. That's an interesting one as well. We also saw last night on Impact Wrestling, Jazz returned as she tried to reunite Jordynne Grace and Rachel Ellering. Now, of course, this stems on Jordynne Grace being perceived as the weak link in this tag team over the course of the last few weeks. It's very apparent, isn't it, that Jordynne Grace is going to be turning heel. She kind of did, but didn't in this segment anyway. Basically, the segment, how it happened is Rachel Ellering came out. She spoke about how, she came into Impact and immediately won the Knockouts Tag Team Championships with Jordynne Grace, and then she lost it, and she feels bad for Jordynne Grace. She feels bad for putting this pressure on her. She feels bad for not noticing the red flags, because she was looking through rose-tinted glasses and all that kind of stuff, and she calls out Jordynne Grace. She mentions Tenille Dashwood's name, and Jordynne Grace gets very angry at that. She says, "No, I'm sorry, you're not the weak link. I want to help you. You're great. I think you're a tremendous person, tremendous pro wrestler. Don't listen to what Tenille Dashwood says." And Jordynne Grace once again goes crazy. And she goes this big ranting promo saying she's not the weak link and she doesn't need Tenille Dashwood to get in her head and all this kind of stuff. And it does bother her that she's not the shortest knockouts tag team champions in history, all this kind of stuff. What I will say about this, and I'll touch on then Jazz coming out, because it was a long segment. It was a long segment. This was like a 15-minute sort of segment. It was super, super long. Jordynne Grace, I want to say this in the best way possible. I thought her promo was good. I did think her promo was good. I thought her delivery was good. I thought the way she spoke was good. And I thought the word she used was great. I truly don't know why she has to pull the face that she does. It's like, if I say, put it this way, if I said to you right now, pull an angry face, and you would go like this. That's what she does, and you don't have to do it. Obviously, you can convey anger. Obviously, you can frown. Obviously, you can open your eyes, and obviously, you can be, or narrow your eyes and be angry and all that kind of stuff. But she just it's proper like child pouting, sulking, and maybe that's what she's going for. But it's certainly like, no, I'm not the weak link. It's like that. It's just bizarre. Totally bizarre. And again, I was watching this because I thought Rachel Ellering's promo, I must say, I thought Rachel Ellering's promo was great. I thought that was a real solid babyface promo. As a viewer watching at home, I thought, yeah, that's a babyface. That is someone that does feel bad and does show remorse. And even to the point towards the end of the segment, she got choked up. She said the last 12 months have been the worst 12 months of my life. And somehow I managed to come out of it. I thought this is a great promo. I thought this was a real good promo. And then Rachel Ellering, like I said, Jordynne Grace, rather, I thought was a real good promo. But I just didn't know why she was pulling that face. Like that, it was strange. It was so strange. Anyway, Jazz comes out and she obviously put the team together. She tries to mediate and says, come on, Jordynne, put it together. And she singles out Jordynne, which once again annoys Jordynne Grace. And eventually she walks off and says, well, I need to think about whether I can tag with you. And she walks, and pretty much as soon as she walks through the curtain, Tenille Dashwood's music plays. So logic would suggest they must have walked past each other, right? Because that's the first thing I thought. I thought, well, they obviously walked past each other. Maybe that's a subtle hint for the eventual moment when Jordynne Grace does turn on Rachel Ellering. Tenille Dashwood comes out, and she's with Caleb with a K, and says, about maybe Rachel Ellering now being her partner, considering Jordynne Grace has walked out on her. Rachel Ellering says no and challenges her to a match. I'm sure that will happen next week. And we end in a bit of a brawl with Rachel Ellering attacking Tenille Dashwood and Jazz attacking Caleb with a K and all that kind of stuff. And that was the end of the segment. They're certainly playing this one. They've been planting the seeds for this one for a while when it comes to Rachel Ellering and Jordynne Grace. So much so that, and the only thing I will say, then I'm not trying to be, a Vince Russo and trying to find a swerve every 5 seconds here, but so much so that if they were going to pull the trigger on Jordynne Grace, turning on Rachel Ellering, I feel like they would have done it already. And it makes you wonder, why haven't they done it already? And maybe they're just going for the complete opposite direction. Rachel Ellering's trying to get Jordynne Grace to come back, trying. Jordynne Grace is undecided, sitting on the fence, and you're thinking in your head, well, Jordynne Grace is going to turn on Rachel Ellering. Maybe eventually, Rachel Ellering's the one to turn. Goes, I asked you enough times and you didn't come back to me, that kind of thing. Maybe that's the situation. I don't know. I still find it difficult, the whole she's the weak link situation when she's a former Knockouts champion. And Jordynne Grace, she even ran through her accomplishments during the promo. She was like, I beat the longest Knockouts champion of all time, was in the only ever Knockouts Iron Man match. I've competed in the X Division. How am I the weak link? It's a good point. How? Rachel Ellering's just come into the company. Surely if anyone's the weak link, it would be her. Right. I don't know. But I thought the segment was good. Again, I didn't really understand why Jordynne Grace was pulling that face. But I thought the promos were good, and it's interesting to see where it's going to go forward from here. Finally, we do have a match announced for next week on Impact Wrestling as well. I mentioned Kenny Omega at the beginning of this video, and it was announced last night on Impact Wrestling. Tommy Dreamer and Don Callis have arranged for a Team Dreamer versus Team Callis 6-man tag team match next week. Callis' team will consist of the Impact World Champion Kenny Omega and the Good Brothers, and Dreamer's team will consist of Sami Callihan, Moose, and Chris Sabin. Interesting that Moose and Sabin are teaming together. Almost like they're planting the seeds for maybe Moose and Sabin to team with each other at Slammiversary against maybe the Young Bucks. I predicted that. I'm sticking with it. And I felt a little bit vindicated when I saw that last night. So who knows? So last week, Dreamer, on behalf of Anthem Sports and Entertainment, fired Callis from Executive Vice President, role that he shared with Scott D'Amore. This came after Callis, of course, used his authority to fire Sami Callihan after Moose and Omega faced off at Against All Odds. This week, Callis received the cold shoulder from the moment he arrived on set with Kenny Omega. After talking to Dreamer, Callis and the Innovator of Violence agreed to create their own teams to face each other in the main event of next week's broadcast. Dreamer asked Callihan during their conversation backstage if he was on board. Callihan was on board the moment he heard Omega was going to be in the match. Moose, on the other hand, volunteered himself into the matchup. He unfortunately wasn't told that Sabin would be the third person representing Dreamer's team. Of course, Moose and Sabin are set to collide against each other, while Callihan is going to face Omega for the Impact World Championship at Slammiversary on Saturday, July 17. So, again, I think this one's interesting. Surely, the Kenny Omega's team has to win that match. The reason I say surely is because Doc Gallows and Carl Anderson have just lost pretty much every match they've been in at this point that's been on Impact Wrestling television for the last several months. Surely they get the win here, and maybe the way they're going to do it is going to have some form of, I don't know, some form of miscommunication by maybe Moose and Sabin, and then one of them pins Chris Sabin, rather. I think maybe that might be the way to do it. But I could see a situation where Callihan pins Carl Anderson once again. It's like Callihan gets the momentum like he did at Against All Odds. Time will only tell. But look, guys, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on all of these Impact Wrestling news stories we've spoken about today? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about Impact Wrestling, AEW, WWE, New Japan Pro Wrestling, all things pro wrestling here on the channel. So be sure to get involved with the community. Drop a comment below. All opinions are welcome. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button too. Really does help us out here on YouTube, get the rankings, and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right corner of the screen right now. Or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or have you come across this video today.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.